In this lecture, we're discussing Chapter 4, Planning, Implementation, and Evaluation. In the previous lectures, we were talking about the role of public administrators in the different steps of policy making and their roles in initiating policies, in assisting decision makers, and in raising awareness to some of the issues and helping decision makers with their expertise and knowledge, as well as talking about the environment and the complex environment in which public administrators do their work. Today, we are talking about implementation, which is the actual domain of public administrators. This is the responsibility of public administrators, where they translate the policy frameworks and the laws into action. And increasingly, uh, we are more interested in the work of public administrators, and uh, there is growing concern for how public administrators do their work, how they make plans for their work, and how they implement and evaluate the results of the programs that they operate, because of the increasing demand for better services for citizens. So the more we want better services, the more we want better use of public resources, the more we want to achieve better results for the use of these public resources, the more we pay attention to how public organizations are utilizing these funds and how they are making plans for implementation and how they actually operate the programs. And there is more increase in the desire to evaluate and to assess to what extent these programs are successful, to what extent these initiatives or policy programs are paying off or giving us the results and the outcomes that we actually want from them. So you hear a lot of initiatives about performance management and management for results, and these are effectively trying to get organizations and public organizations to carefully plan for their work, to have work plans and detailed operational plans for how they want to translate policies into programs and how they implement, and having clear evaluation criteria and having uh, clear metrics and clear measures upon which we can evaluate and upon which we can measure to what extent the programs that we implement are really effective and are using resources efficiently. And so there is more and more growing concern about the work of public administrators in this area. And so managers in the public sector are continuously working on planning and replanning and designing programs and looking at the different evaluations in order to improve the performance of their work. So all organizations need to plan for their operations and for their activities. And strategic planning here does not mean just simply assigning tasks to employees or telling them you need to do this today and you need to do this tomorrow. It is more of an overall plan and a series of actions and steps that guide all the organization activities and how we deal with with problems when they arise, how we organize and structure our organization as a whole, how we link and relate our work and activities together, the what we want to achieve. So we need to carefully lay out the objectives that we want to achieve, how the structure of the organization helps to achieve this work, how the work of each and every employee in this work is integrated towards achieving those goals, what are the different ways and scenarios with which we can carry out our work, how to cope with changing circumstances. And this is very important because when we do a strategic plan, we don't only look at what we're doing inside the organization, but as we will talk about later, we also look at the environment in which we operate. So we need to pay attention to the complexity in which we work, especially for public organizations, as we said previously, that the work of public organizations, because we serve so many citizens, we work with different organizations, public organizations, private organizations, or nonprofit organizations, sometimes with different levels of government organizations operating at different levels. So we have a very complex and dynamic network. And so we need to take into consideration all of these uh, networks and all of the complexities. And so the our plan should take into consideration those different elements of change and those different elements of complexity in the environment in order to better use our resources in a way that maximizes the objectives of the organization. And so, when doing a strategic plan for a public organization, it is also critical to pay attention or to listen to as many individuals and to as many stakeholders as possible, and to pay attention to the interests of the many people and the many organizations and the many uh, and the many interest groups or the different interests of the citizens that the organization serves in order to arrive at a plan that can best serve the community and best serve the citizens that the organization serves. So it's very important when making a plan to listen to the different perspectives and the different ideas from the different people, especially citizens and the interest groups or the people interested in the work of the organization and who benefit from or are affected by the work of the organization. Before discussing the steps in strategic planning, I want to first discuss why do organizations undertake strategic planning? Why is it important for organizations to plan? The first and obvious reason as to why organizations need to plan is to give clarity and direction to the organization. By taking the time to identify the organization's mission and the purpose for its existence, and to think about or to take time to plan and make strategies for the organization, it allows the organization to have a sense of direction as to what they want to achieve, and also at the same time provide the employees with some direction and to help them see the importance of their work within the overall plan of the organization, and how they're and to integrate their day-to-day activities into the overall plan of the work. And secondly, rela- and related to the environment of or the environment in which public organizations work, as we said, because public organizations have multiple objectives and often work in a very dynamic environment, and sometimes the objectives that they want to achieve can come into conflict with one another. And so it's very important that they take the time to think about their objectives and to prioritize these objectives and to think about what is more important to them, so that when it comes time to making decisions during their work and during the implementation of their programs, they know how to make decisions that can best or that can help them best achieve their higher end goals. Related to this as well is because, again, of this dynamic environment, we are likely to expect to see the public administrators facing a lot of problems and a lot of changes as they implement programs. And so if they have thought about the problems that they are likely to encounter, if they have anticipated some of the difficulties they face, they are more likely to be able to cope with the changes and to find solutions to the problems easily and to continue the work without disruptions. Whereas if they didn't take the time to plan unforeseen circumstances or what difficulties they are likely to encounter, then this might lead to disruptions to their work. They might have to stop or hold the programs until they think of the problems, think of the solutions, and come back with new solutions. But if they have invested the time and effort to think of alternative scenarios as to how to do their work and to think of different ways of solving problems and be ready to help or be ready to remove obstacles as it comes their way, then they might save time and effort as they work and avoid any disruptions to their work. And also, as we said, when we want to do strategic planning, we want to involve as many stakeholders in the process as possible. And so by having stakeholders or by taking input and ideas from the different stakeholders, especially from their citizens who receive the services of the organizations, this allows the organization to come up with new ideas and new thoughts about how to operate and how to do their work and how to effectively do or how to effectively achieve their objectives while at the same time utilizing the resources efficiently and minimizing any waste. So, how do organizations make their strategic plans? The first step in making a strategic plan for the organization is to identify the mission of the organization or the main objective of the organization. This is like the identity of the organization. It's a statement that describes the purpose for which the organization exists, why the organization is there, what is its main function, what it aspires to do, what is its activities or main activities or programs and objectives that it wants to achieve, who are the groups of citizens or clients that this organization aims to serve. So, for example, a university, the mission of a university would be, or an education institution would be, um, educating students or providing good quality education for students in their area. So you're not only focusing on providing education, but also the quality. You want to improve or deliver high quality service to the citizens. So identifying this mission or identifying this purpose for the organization helps in having a vision for this organization and in communicating this vision to the employees in the organization and the workers in this organization so that their daily activities and the work that they do can be integrated towards the achievement of this mission of the organization. After identifying our mission, the second step in planning for the organization is to do an assessment or an analysis of the external environment in which the organization operates. Now, as we said, public organizations work in very dynamic and complex environments and they work with a large number of interest groups and stakeholders and other public organizations as well. And so they need to be aware of the complexity of the environment in which they work. And often the assessment of the environment in which the organization operates needs to take into consideration, for example, political factors or legal considerations. So, for example, if we continue with our example of a university, so some of the political considerations are to whom this organization is accountable to. So, this organization is accountable to the Ministry of Higher Education, perhaps the Council or the Higher Council of Universities, and these in turn issues regulations or rules for the work of universities that they have to abide by. So these are important considerations in the environment in which the university operates that needs to be taken into consideration. Also, economic circumstances, how much financial support or how much budget are we getting from the government, how much money are we generating from our programs, from our fees and other activities. the technologies around us, so technologies that help in improving the educational environment and providing better education to students. To what extent are we up to date with that? The organization's competitors, so public universities can have competition from other public universities or other private universities. To what extent are we attracting good students a particular of a particular level and a particular knowledge, who can be a base for a good and strong student base for our university, and so on. So the analysis or the environmental analysis that we do should focus on both identifying the positives in the environment that we work in, that is the opportunities that we can utilize. And so, for example, availability of more funds, availability for example of external financing from international donors for scholarships for our students, for example, as well as threats or difficulties that make our environment much more difficult to operate, such as expectations of maybe perhaps less funding in subsequent years, expectations of more and more private schools and private universities operating and offering attractive and better quality maybe education for students. So we need to be more competitive. So looking at the environment in which we operate, paying attention to what we want to offer to our clients or our citizens or the beneficiaries of the public programs, as well as identifying where opportunities can come from and where we can use these opportunities for the betterment of the services we offer, as well as planning for or anticipating the problems and the hindrances and the obstacles that we may face along the way, so that we do not delay or obstruct our work, and be able to adjust to the changing circumstances and the difficulties that we face in our environment. Beside the external analysis, we also need to do an internal analysis of the organization's capabilities and resources. And so what we want to look at is, what strengths do we have? What are we capable of as an organization, and what are the resources that are available to us to carry out and implement our programs? So these could be financial resources, our human resources, the people who work on the organization, their expertise, their training, their knowledge. All of these are assets and capabilities and resources of the organization. Also, to what extent do we have solid organizational systems or good organizational systems that help us in achieving our work, and the quality with which we are able to do our work, and all of these resources combined constitute our strengths and our resources, but also deficiencies in these constitute weaknesses that we need to work on. And so, together, the strengths and weaknesses that we have, and the opportunities and threats in our environment, this is together are the SWOT analysis that we do in order to identify the positives that we have, whether internally in our organization, or the opportunities and the positives that exist in our environment that we can utilize. And on the other hand, the negatives or the weaknesses in our internal environment and in our resources and capabilities that we need to work on, as well as any obstacles or threats that we can face as we implement our work. And so our strategy or our work should be, or should work towards making use of our strengths and our capabilities, and capitalizing on the opportunities and the positives in our environment. And at the same time, our strategies should also be about working on improving the weaknesses in our systems, and also making plans or having contingency plans for dealing with any obstacles or any threats that are coming from our environment. So, based on the assessment that the organization has done on its external environment and internal environment, the organization can develop alternative strategies and work plans on how to operate its work and how to achieve its objectives. And so these alternative ways of doing work can help it find out which ways or which operations can help it maximize its use of resources or help it achieve its objectives better, and at the same time be ready with some planning and some strategies where or to cope with changing circumstances and changing situations in a way that enhances its work and at the same time avoid disruptions or delays and be able to better cope with any changing circumstances. After planning for their programs, public organizations start implementation. This is the action phase. This is the phase where you start putting the plans that you design into operation. And so the implementation often involves allocating the financial and human resources, so actually spending the money on the activities and mobilizing your employees and assigning them tasks to do with respect to the activities that you want to perform, making the organizational structures and systems that help you in doing your operations, issuing the rules and procedures to guide the work of every employee in the organization, working with the different stakeholders, with the different organizations, whether nonprofit or private organizations, or with the citizens, or with other non-governmental organizations, or with international organizations that are interested in the area. So interacting with these people on a daily basis and doing the daily work of running the programs. This is the implementation of the programs. And this is usually thought of being the hardest part of any policy program. Even though it is hard, as you've seen, designing a policy can take so much time, so many people involved, so many ideas, so many ways of evaluating the policies, and it's often difficult and hard to make a final decision about the outcome of the policies and who benefits and who loses and how to maximize the use of our resources in order to implement or in order to design a particular policy that benefits as much people as possible and that is as effective and as efficient in using our resources as possible. But while this is a very difficult task and often involves a lot of people and a lot of resources and a lot of ideas and a lot of going back and forth in order to arrive at the end at a policy document, as much or as hard as this might be in order to arrive at a policy document that takes into account the interests of everyone, implementation is even harder. Because even if we arrive at a policy uh, platform or at a law that takes into account the interests of a lot of people, that satisfies a lot of the needs of our citizens, that looks at how we can use our resources uh, efficiently, implementation becomes very critical. If we are unable to effectively implement the program as it is designed by law, many programs might fail or might fail to achieve the objectives of the policy that they were designed to achieve. And so it is very important to put time into implementation and in planning or previously planning for the implementation of programs before actually initiating the program, because many good ideas that seem very good and very creative on paper and as a policy statement might just fail when it comes to the implementation stage. And so implementation is very important. One of the very important factors that complicate the process of implementation is again the conflicting interests of the many individuals that are often trying to get the policy or get the programs to meet or to satisfy their interests. And so implementation of programs often tries to use the best ways or find the best ways to actually implement the policy, keeping in mind the objectives of the policy, but also trying to work with the many interests and many stakeholders that have an interest in the implementation of this program. And so this complicates the work of public administrators. And this is why we said that public administrators, when implementing policy, they are actually making policy. They don't just take what is stated in the policy document or in the law blindly and put it into action. There is actually too much work and too much effort and too much planning and activity and rules and plans that they put into the work that actually is to the extent of making policy and not just blindly dictating or blindly uh, making what the law is saying. And so the role of public administrators in making policy in the implementation stage is very critical because it is the actual translation of the intention or of the objective of a policy framework into action. And so the way they implement or how they implement can determine whether this policy has been successful or not. Following implementation of public programs, we need to evaluate these programs. We need to assess whether these programs have been successful or not, to what extent have they achieved the goals and objectives that they were designed to achieve. And as we said, because of the demand for better quality services for citizens, there is more and more need to evaluate the work of public administrators, to what extent are they effectively and efficiently using the resources, and to what extent are they responsive to citizens' needs while implementing their public programs. And so evaluation is important because it provides data and information to decision makers to help them decide which programs are running well and are very effective and can be continued or expanded, and which programs are not doing so well and may need some improvement or may be eliminated, and perhaps there is need for better programs designed. And so it can help decision makers make informed decisions and better decisions about which programs need to continue, need to be expanded, and which programs need to be improved upon or need some changing in order to deliver the desired services that citizens need. Secondly, because we said public administrators are not elected officials, but we need some form of holding them accountable. In order to hold them accountable for the work they do, we need to consistently monitor and evaluate the work that they do. And so evaluation helps both the legislatures and the public to scrutinize the work of public administrators and to assess to what extent are they using public money efficiently, and to make sure that no abuses or no misuse of public funds is happening. So this is very important to continuously evaluate the outcomes of public programs and the use of the resources and how the money that is allocated to these programs is being spent. And finally, evaluation constitutes the basis for new planning. As we said, planning is a continuous process, and so in order to improve upon our plan and make better and improved strategies and work plans we need evaluation information. So the information and data that we get from our evaluations can help us better make new plans that helps us improve our work and make better our operations and our activities in order to achieve our goals. So how do we evaluate public programs? There are several ways to evaluate programs. One way to classify or distinguish between different ways of evaluations is outcome evaluations, or evaluations that focus on outcome, and evaluations that focus on process. From their name, outcome evaluations are evaluations that focus on the results of the programs and the activities. So, to what extent these programs are actually achieving their objectives. And so, in this sense, program or outcome evaluations are focusing on the effectiveness of public programs. So, to what extent are the programs are actually achieving the outcomes or the objectives that they were designed to achieve. So, for example, a university, if we're going to focus on the outcomes or to evaluate it based on the outcomes of the process or the outcomes of the education process, then we might look at the number of students graduating, the specializations of these students, their GPAs, the quality of their education and their knowledge, whether they were employed or how much of them were employed within, how many of them were employed within 6 months of their graduation. So these are measures of the outcome of the education programs that we have. Process evaluations, on the other hand, focus on monitoring and evaluating the process or every element of the process of work during the implementation. So, take again the example of the university, then a process evaluation would focus on the quality of the curriculums they're giving to the students throughout the year, the training and the knowledge of the professors and the teaching assistants who are administering these lectures to the students, and the quality of the curricula that they give to them, and the amount of lectures that they give them, the consistency of the lectures and schedules, going on schedule and not missing a lot of lectures. Um, the quality of the classrooms, the availability of slideshows and projectors, and the availability of other facilities that help students do their assignments, such as libraries, availability of books in the library, and availability of journals and studies that help the students do their work. So these are the process, the elements of the process through which the university does its activities. And so this is, we focus on the process during the school year, whereas the outcome evaluation looks at the end to the results of their exams, to their graduation, and to their GPAs. And oftentimes, evaluations can take both of these elements into consideration. So we want to focus on how the public administrators are doing their work throughout the program, but also we want to evaluate at the end what they have arrived at. So it's not uncommon to see evaluations that take into consideration both evaluations during the process and during the actual work, and also evaluation at the end result of the activities. And so evaluations in this sense are very important because they guide us to what the difficulties that we face throughout the process of the work, why have we achieved or not achieved our objectives, what difficulties we face, what we can do, and what we can do to improve our existing operations, what new ideas can help us achieve our objectives better, and so on. Sometimes the evaluation might lead us beyond the quick fixes or the small fixes of improving some elements of our activities, to thinking of the need for a new policy or a new framework to guide our operations and our work. And so evaluation in this sense would call not just for small adjustments to our operations here and there to better achieve our objectives, but they might call for the need to revisit the issues at hand, to rethink of our problems and our solutions and generate new policy ideas for our work. And this will be the topic for our next lectures.